People don't react to you. They react to the parts of themselves that awaken in your presence. You have to understand something Jung repeated over and over. Human beings do not see the world as it is. They see the world as they are. This means that every time someone looks at you, they're not actually seeing you. They're seeing a reflection of their own fears, their insecurities, their hidden desires, and the traits they have spent years refusing to confront. You become a mirror they can't escape, and that mirror threatens them more than you'll ever realize. Most people live in psychological comfort zones built out of denial. They bury the parts of themselves that feel weak, ashamed, jealous, or unworthy. They don't eliminate these traits. They simply shove them deeper into the subconscious, hoping no one will ever notice. But then you walk into the room, not because you're trying to expose anything, not because you're doing anything dramatic, but because your way of being, your silence, your discipline, your self-control, your emotional distance, your independence creates contrast. And that contrast is what reveals their shadow. The shadow is the part of the psyche that holds everything a person refuses to acknowledge: their envy, their laziness, their resentment, their fear, their anger, their guilt, their unfulfilled ambitions, and their abandoned potential. All the fragments of the self they decided were too painful or too shameful to admit. Your presence pulls these fragments toward the surface. You become the trigger, not because you are doing anything wrong, but because you represent the truth they've been avoiding. You have to understand the danger of this. When someone sees their own shadow in you, they don't respond with gratitude. They respond with irritation, with judgment, with sudden hostility, with unexplained tension, with silent discomfort they can't articulate. The mind doesn't like being confronted with its own weaknesses, so instead of facing them, it projects them outward. This is why Jung said that people do not hate others. They hate what they see of themselves in others. Imagine someone who has spent years avoiding responsibility. They drift from distraction to distraction, comforting themselves with excuses. Then they meet you, someone who moves differently, someone who has a sense of purpose, someone who is quietly building something for themselves. They aren't inspired, they're threatened, because your discipline highlights their lack of discipline. Your clarity makes their confusion louder. Your growth exposes their stagnation. And instead of asking themselves why they feel this way, they convince themselves that you're the problem. They don't dislike you for who you are. They dislike you for what your existence forces them to confront. Think about the person who pretends to be confident but feels small inside. When they meet someone who is genuinely grounded, who doesn't need validation, who doesn't seek attention, who doesn't crumble at minor rejection, they feel an emotional imbalance. Your strength amplifies their insecurity. They won't say it out loud. They may even smile at you, act friendly, pretend nothing is wrong, but inside, their shadow is screaming. And instead of dealing with that internal chaos, they unconsciously redirect it at you. You become the symbolic enemy, the representation of everything they don't want to face within themselves. What most people call hate isn't hate at all. It's unprocessed self-awareness. People don't resent you because you did something harmful. They resent you because you did something uncommon. You kept growing. You didn't break the rules of society. You broke the emotional agreements people quietly expect you to follow. The agreement to stay at their level. The agreement to play small. The agreement to keep yourself diluted so others don't feel threatened. The agreement to hide your strength so they can pretend they're strong too. The agreement to suppress your ambition because it exposes their lack of it. You violated these unspoken contracts simply by becoming yourself. This is the psychological truth behind why your presence makes certain people uncomfortable. They weren't prepared to see themselves so clearly. They weren't prepared to be reminded of the potential they abandoned. They weren't prepared to confront the truth that you didn't have more advantages. You just made different choices. That is the most painful realization of all. Because once someone sees that you are not lucky, they're forced to confront the fact that they are not trapped. And the moment a person realizes that they are the obstacle to their own life, resentment becomes their only defense. It is easier for them to resent your growth than to confront their own unwillingness to grow. You become the symbol of a path they refuse to walk. And here is where the psychological tension becomes most intense. People don't just project their weaknesses onto you, they project their unrealized selves. You represent the discipline they failed to develop, the courage they never expressed, the life they never stepped into. You walk through the world embodying everything they secretly wish they could be, but aren't willing to work for. And deep down, that feels like betrayal to them. Not because you betrayed them, but because you betrayed the version of the world where they believed effort was impossible. Your existence disproves their narrative. Your progress invalidates their excuses. Your self-control reveals their emotional instability. Your inner strength exposes their inner weakness. Every time you grow, you show them what they could have been. And that is the harshest mirror of all. This is why the shadow reacts with hatred, envy, or subtle sabotage. Not because they truly want to see you fail, but because watching you succeed forces them to acknowledge the parts of themselves they abandoned long ago. They don't hate your achievements. They hate what your achievements reveal about their choices. The truth is painful, but liberating. People's reactions to you have very little to do with you. You are simply the surface where their buried selves appear. Your presence reveals what they've been hiding from. Your energy awakens what they've tried to silence. Your growth forces them to confront their stagnation. You are not the problem. You are the mirror, and the reason they can't escape that mirror is simple. You show them who they could become and who they chose not to be. There is something dangerously unsettling about a person who refuses to fit in, a person who does not follow the script, a person who does not seek permission, applause, or understanding, a person who walks into a room and instantly breaks the quiet agreement everyone else is living by, the agreement to remain average together. People don't admit this out loud, but they fear the individual who stops playing the game, because most people spend their entire lives hiding behind roles they didn't choose. They live through the persona, the social mask Jung said we build to survive the expectations of others. And once the mask becomes comfortable, it becomes prison walls. But then someone like you appears, and everything shifts. You aren't following the same emotional choreography. You aren't trapped by their invisible rules. You aren't bending yourself into the shapes society approves of. You aren't addicted to conformity the way they are. Your existence becomes a threat, not because you are dangerous, but because you are free. Freedom is intimidating to those who surrendered theirs. Your independence reminds them that they are not living authentically. Your nonconformity exposes the truth that the limitations they believe in are self-imposed. Your difference breaks the illusion that everyone has to move through life the same way. And this is why people want you smaller, not because they want to destroy you, but because they want to protect the worldview that keeps them comfortable. If you can live outside the script, it means they could too. And that realization terrifies them. Society doesn't reward difference. It manages it. It tames it. It tries to shrink it down into something predictable, digestible, safe. People don't know what to do with a person who isn't seeking approval, because approval is the currency they live on. It's how they measure their worth. It's how they decide who they're allowed to be. So when you show up unconcerned with validation, when you don't need the crowd to agree with you, when you don't shapeshift to avoid discomfort, you destabilize everything they rely on to feel secure. You become the exception that breaks the rule. And people hate exceptions, not because they are wrong, but because they reveal the truth about what is possible. Nonconformity creates pressure, psychological pressure, social pressure, emotional pressure, because in your presence, people must confront the fact that they chose safety over authenticity, approval over individuality, comfort over growth. They must face the truth that they are not living life. They are performing it. You refusing to join their performance feels like an attack. To the conformist mind, difference is rebellion. Even if you're silent, even if you're peaceful, even if you're not trying to prove anything, your existence alone becomes the rebellion. People will start trying to control you without realizing it. They will give you subtle corrections. Don't do that. Why are you always like this? Can't you just be normal? They will nudge you back toward conformity because your authenticity disrupts the emotional order they depend on. They need everyone to operate at the same temperature, and you are fire in a room of lukewarm souls. People want you smaller because a smaller you is easier to categorize, easier to understand, easier to dismiss, easier to manage. They don't know how to interact with someone who is not driven by the same fears they are. fear of rejection, fear of judgment, fear of being misunderstood, fear of being different. But you don't fear these things the way they do, and that is why you frighten them. A free mind is unpredictable. A self-defined individual is uncontrollable. A person who thinks for themselves is the most dangerous type of person society can produce, not because they overthrow systems, but because they make others question their own lives. And questioning one's life is the first step to dismantling everything that feels comfortable. Your presence becomes a catalyst. It shakes people awake. It disrupts their psychological sleep. It forces them to confront who they are versus who they pretend to be. Nonconformity is not just difference. It is a mirror. And mirrors make people uncomfortable. When you refuse to gossip, people feel exposed. When you choose solitude, people feel insecure. When you detach from drama, people feel powerless. When you move with purpose, people feel behind. When you prioritize inner truth over social acceptance, people feel judged, even if you say nothing. You don't have to challenge them. Your existence already does, because you are proof that life doesn't have to look the way they made it look. And instead of growing, most people would rather make sure you don't grow either. They want you smaller so they don't have to expand. They want you quieter so they don't have to listen to their inner voice. They want you less confident so they don't have to confront their insecurity. They want you more predictable so they don't have to face the possibility that their lives are built on routines, not choices. Being different makes people uncomfortable. Being unapologetically different makes people hostile because your courage exposes their fear. Your authenticity exposes their facade. Your independence exposes their dependence. Your path exposes their stagnation. You don't fit into their world, and they don't want to rebuild the world to include you. It is easier for them if you shrink. Jung said that society is terrified of the individual who has become a self, a person who no longer sacrifices their inner truth for external harmony. Because once a person becomes themselves, they cannot be controlled. And this is the real reason people want you smaller. A self-directed person breaks the entire hierarchy of validation. You stop needing the crowd. You stop needing the script. You stop needing the persona. You stop needing permission to exist. And when you no longer need the world starts fearing what you represent. Your difference is not the problem. Their conformity is. Most people do not have an issue with who you are. They have an issue with what you make them feel about themselves. You remind them that they abandoned their potential too early. You remind them that they traded freedom for acceptance. You remind them that they built a life around fear, not truth. And you, by simply choosing a different path, expose all of that. This is why they want you smaller, not because you are too much, but because your existence proves they are living too little. Being different is not easy, but neither is being unreal. In the end, you must choose who you inconvenience, yourself by shrinking or others by being free. And freedom, no matter how much it threatens them, is the only path that leads you back to who you really are. There is a kind of competition people enter without announcing it. You don't sign up for it. You don't agree to it. You might not even know it's happening. But the moment you begin to grow, the moment you begin to rise, the moment you begin to separate yourself from the ordinary, the silent competition begins. And here is the truth you must understand. Most people compare themselves to you even when you're not competing with them. This is not a conscious rivalry. It's something deeper, something primitive, something Jung called the unconscious conflict, the internal tension people feel when someone around them becomes a mirror of their unrealized potential. Your strength creates a psychological imbalance inside them, because human beings are wired for comparison long before they are wired for self-awareness. They measure themselves against others instinctively. They look at your progress, your discipline, your calmness, your clarity, and instead of being inspired, they feel something else rising in them, something uncomfortable, something heavy, something that whispers, you should be doing more. You should be better. You should be where they are. And when that whisper becomes too loud, it doesn't stay inside. It becomes resentment, not because you hurt them, but because your existence reveals the truth of their choices. You are not their enemy. You are their benchmark, and benchmarks make people uneasy. Your strength, emotional, mental, spiritual, or even financial, doesn't just elevate you. It exposes the gap between who they are and who they could have been. the gap they've avoided, ignored, or justified for years. People want to believe they are doing enough. They want to believe their life is on track. They want to believe their comfort is justified. But when you move differently, when you grow faster, when you show discipline in areas where they are chaotic, when you show calm where they show panic, that belief begins to crack. And instead of asking themselves why they feel threatened, they unconsciously blame you. Your strength becomes the thief they accuse for stealing their sense of adequacy. Your rising feels like their falling. Your progress feels like their failure. Your confidence feels like their insecurity being exposed. This is how the silent competition begins. Not with words, not with declarations, but with tension. Subtle, invisible tension that grows every time you take another step forward. You'll feel it in the small reactions. The forced smile when you share a win, the quiet shift in energy when you enter the room, the excuses they make when you accomplish something they said was impossible, the sudden distance that appears when your life starts changing too quickly, the way they say must be nice instead of well done, the way your discipline makes them feel attacked even though you said nothing about them at all. People think competition requires hostility, but the most dangerous rivalry is silent, because even the person feeling it doesn't understand why they're reacting the way they are. Jung warned that the human psyche projects what it doesn't want to own. So when someone feels inferior in your presence, they project that feeling outward. They decide you're arrogant. They decide you think you're better than them. They decide you are making them insecure on purpose. But the truth is simple. Your strength is not humiliating them. Their own neglected potential is. You see, every person carries an unlived life inside them, a version of themselves they wish they had become. This version follows them everywhere, whispering reminders of dreams they abandoned, risks they never took, disciplines they never built. When they see someone who is actively becoming their ideal self, even if it's you, it triggers the pain of their unrealized potential. The stronger you become, the louder that pain grows. This is why people start pulling away from you when you evolve, not because they hate you, but because they can't stand the version of themselves they see reflected through your growth. Your victory highlights their stagnation. Your self-control highlights their impulsiveness. Your focus highlights their distractions. Your resilience highlights their fragility. Your discipline highlights their excuses. Every step you take away from who you used to be becomes a reminder of the steps they never took. They feel like they are losing a game they never consciously agreed to play, a game they began the moment they compared their life to yours. And here is the irony. You're not competing. You're building. You're healing. You're improving. You're becoming who you were meant to be. But to them, it feels like you're taking something from them. Validation, superiority, control, comfort. The illusion that they're doing just fine. Your strength disrupts their emotional equilibrium, and human beings hate losing their balance. This is why many people are kinder to you when you're struggling than when you're succeeding. Your weakness reassures them. Your pain validates them. Your stagnation comforts them, but your growth threatens them. When you rise, you force them to confront themselves, and most people avoid self-confrontation at all costs. They will distance themselves not because you became worse, but because you became better. They will criticize you, not because you changed in a bad way, but because you changed in a way they weren't prepared for. They will gossip, not because you've done something wrong, but because they need a story that protects them from their own guilt. They need a narrative where your strength is somehow your flaw, because accepting your evolution would mean admitting their lack of it. This is the essence of the silent competition. You grow, and they feel smaller. You succeed, and they feel behind. You evolve, and they feel exposed. And this unspoken rivalry continues as long as they refuse to face themselves. But here is where the truth becomes liberating. Their silent competition is not your responsibility. Your job is not to shrink so they feel adequate. Your job is not to dim your light so they don't feel insecure. Your job is not to slow down so they don't feel left behind. Your path is yours. Your growth is yours. Your strength is yours. It was never meant to be measured against anyone else. In the end, their sense of loss has nothing to do with your rise. It comes from recognizing how much of their own potential they never stepped into. You are not their opponent. You are their wake-up call. Some will learn from it. Some will resent it. Some will run from it. Some will rise because of it. But whether they evolve or remain threatened, your progress must continue because your strength is not their loss. Their refusal to grow is. There is one thing people will never forgive you for. Not your mistakes, not your flaws, not your failures, but your transformation. Because the moment you become the person they always wished they could be, you commit the one sin society never forgets. You expose their refusal to change. Most people build their identity around the belief that growth is impossible for them. They convince themselves that discipline is too hard, healing is too painful, change is too complicated, and responsibility is too heavy. These beliefs become their comfort, their excuse, their emotional shelter. But then someone like you rises. Slowly at first, quietly, unnoticed. You start doing the inner work no one else wanted to face. You develop habits they abandoned years ago. You remove yourself from drama they still cling to. You detach from the noise they feel addicted to. You build a backbone where they built excuses. You start walking a path they always said they would start one day. And that is when everything changes, because your evolution forces them to confront a truth they've been running from. It was never impossible. They simply chose not to try. What people resent the most is not your success, but the implication that they could have achieved something too, if they had chosen differently. Your growth becomes proof that their excuses were lies. Your healing becomes proof that their pain was avoidable. Your discipline becomes proof that their chaos was self-inflicted. Your self-mastery becomes proof that they surrendered too early. And people do not forgive the person who shatters the illusions they depend on. You become the embodiment of their unlived life, the version of themselves they abandoned, ignored, or silenced. Every step you take forward reflects the steps they never took. Every layer you shed reflects the layers they refused to peel back. Every strength you develop reflects the strength they feared they might never possess. You are no longer just a person. You are a reminder of who they could have been. A reminder of what they sacrificed for comfort, a reminder of the dreams they postponed too long, a reminder of the resilience they never tested, a reminder of the courage they couldn't muster. And people resent reminders because reminders hurt. It is easier to resent the person who changed than face the truth of your own stagnation. Jung said the greatest hostility emerges not from the darkness in others, but from the light. When someone stands too close to illumination, their shadow begins to scream. That's what your transformation does. It pulls people's shadows to the surface. They feel exposed by your discipline, threatened by your independence, judged by your silence, challenged by your evolution, unsafe around your authenticity, inferior beside your strength, not because you are looking down on them, but because they are looking down on themselves. People don't hate the new you. They hate that the new you reveals the old them. They hate the comparison your life forces them to make, a comparison they never win. They hate that you escaped the environment that kept them small. They hate that you built a mind they wish they had. They hate that you refuse to drown in the emotional patterns they still cling to. Your transformation becomes the proof they failed to transform. And people will forgive almost anything except being forced to confront their own potential. Here's the part that hurts the most. They admired you when you were struggling. They liked you when you were predictable. They supported you when you needed them. They praised you when you were safe for them to be around. But the moment you became more grounded, more disciplined, more self-aware, more detached, more focused, you became too much. People want you to grow, but not past them. They want you to heal, but not in ways that make their own wounds visible. They want you to succeed, but not in ways that force them to question their failures. They want you to be better, but not that much better. And once you cross that invisible line, everything changes. The tone shifts, the energy cools, the smiles become thinner, the support becomes weaker, the air becomes tighter, because deep down they feel betrayed, not by your actions, but by your evolution. Your growth destroys the emotional contract they had with you, the unspoken agreement that you would remain familiar, relatable, manageable. But you broke that agreement the moment you chose growth over comfort. You committed the unforgivable sin. You outgrew the version of you that made them feel comfortable with themselves. Now your discipline makes them feel lazy. Your clarity makes them feel lost. Your confidence makes them feel insecure. Your boundaries make them feel controlling. Your purpose makes them feel empty. Your transformation makes them feel stuck. Every upgrade you make highlights a downgrade in them. Every boundary you set highlights their lack of self-respect. Every success you achieve highlights the courage they never exercised. You did not outgrow them. They stayed behind. But instead of admitting this, they rewrite the story in their favor. They say you changed too much. They say you became arrogant. They say you think you're better. They say you're not the same person anymore. But that's the point. You're not supposed to be. You worked for this. You bled for this. You sacrificed for this. You rebuilt yourself from the inside out. You became the person they always imagined themselves becoming. And that is something the ego cannot forgive, because the ego survives by comparing upward while pretending it's comparing downward. It thrives on superiority, on comfort, on illusion. Your growth threatens all three. You didn't betray them. You betrayed the smallness they expected from you. In the end, you must accept something Jung knew well. When you become your true self, you lose the people who only knew your false self, but you gain something far more powerful: your life back, your peace back, your direction back, your integrity back, your soul back. People will resent your transformation until they transform themselves. Until then, your evolution will feel like their defeat. But that is not your burden. Your only responsibility is to become the person you were meant to be, even if that means becoming the person they never had the courage to become.